That's your number 8?
That is my number 8.
All right. My number 8 is classic, and I'm going back to the 80s. The Smiths. Meat is Murder. This is the second album from the Smiths. And it's funny because there is a little bit of digital manipulation in this photograph as well. It's originally a screenshot from the movie In the Year of the Pig by, let's make sure I can say this right, Emile de Antonio. It was a documentary about the Vietnam War. The original picture of this, it doesn't say Meat is Murder. I don't know how well it can be seen on here. I will put up a picture. But it says Meat is Murder on his helmet. Mm-hmm. And originally, what it says on there is Make War Not Love on the helmet. And from what I understand, it was just, I haven't seen the movie, but the documentary is a scathing view of, what was going on in Vietnam at the time. The movie did come out in 1969, and it was probably one of the things that started pushing less of the hippies and that kind of movement, and probably moved it more into, your average Joe, your average Jane, starting to question what is the point of the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. Now it has, so again, it was manipulated to say Meat is Murder, and it is done in this, little 4-square style, and that was all Morrissey. Morrissey picked out the picture, set it up this way. So actually, Morrissey himself did design this particular album cover from the picture. Let me just peek at my notes, make sure I'm covering everything. That's basically it on that one. Classic cover again. Iconic cover, I feel. Yeah, and a great album. I have the tape version here, which is the American version. So this one does have How Soon Is Now on it, which if you were to buy this today or back in England in the day, it would not have How Soon Is Now on it. That was a single, and as we talked about before, the Smiths were notorious for putting songs out as putting songs out as singles and not putting them on the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was. I suppose if it's reproduced this way on the tape, was it always a 4-square photo, or was there ever versions where it was just the?
Even the album has 4 squares. I've never seen it. The only time I've seen this picture just by itself is a reference to the movie In the Year of the Pig.
Because it suggests Warhol as well, Andy Warhol, the replicating the same sort of image over and over.
And Morrissey was a huge fan of Warhol. He was a big Velvet Underground fan, a big New York Dolls fan. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think Morrissey was, for lack of a better word, complicit in bringing the New York Dolls back together for a tour years later. Mm. So I think the New York Dolls were bar none. And not only that, most of the Smiths covers, I think, are Warhol-related images. Maybe it's not so much like Louder Than Bombs, but their first album with the guy with the shirt off sitting on there, that's an Andy Warhol thing. A lot of their singles had Andy Warhol images from Warhol movies. They actually have, and I can't think what song it is. It might be This Charming Man, that Morrissey actually appears on the single. But the original was a picture of a guy from a Warhol movie. They didn't get permission for that particular image. So Morrissey went in and had somebody take a photograph of him doing the exact same pose as the original art that he was looking at, or the original photography.
Mm.
So Morrissey was huge on Warhol.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was aware of that. I haven't seen a lot of their single art, but I have all of their albums. And so that was, I mean, a theme kind of to their, I think where even at least in some of them, in the liner notes, whoever was in the photo was listed as the cover star.
Yes.
So they never appeared on their own jackets, their own album sleeves, until, strangely, Morrissey, when he was solo, then he's smack on the cover of, I think, every album that he's like ever put out, and they're usually fairly bad photos. He's another one who in recent years, I mean, they were never like great, but Viva Hate had a stylized thing, and the Vauxhall and I had a halfway decent kind of photo of him like on stage, but some of the last couple ones of his albums in the last 5 years or so just been hideously designed covers.
But it's weird. His early albums, his early solo albums, did make me think, even though it's just a picture of him instead of the cover star, still had a very Smiths-like aesthetic to it.
Mm.
But just instead of Warhol muse, it's Morrissey instead.
Mm. Yeah, or I think I got mine mixed up. I'm thinking Your Arsenal is the one maybe that he's on stage. I'm mixing up my Morrissey albums, but they weren't bad. They all had pictures of him. They didn't start striking me as bad until the last couple. I think there's one called California Sun or something from a couple years ago. You look up the album cover of that, you go, oh my God, who was working on this? and how many seconds did they have to complete it?
Right. Well, and I always found it kind of weird, though it's not exactly, but how much Bona Drag looked like Strange Ways Here We Come.
Yeah.
It's slightly different angle and all that, but it's that same kind of like that look that you were talking about with Tracy Chapman. Mm-hmm. Almost like picture, and then we're going to take another picture of this picture once it's developed, and then that's going to be the picture. And like you said, it gives it fuzzy lines without being out of focus.
Yeah. Yeah. A little grain, a little texture, and a little softness. Yeah. So yeah, classic album.
Without all that detail, with him looking down, you can't see his actual eyeballs, Mm-hmm. That shadow just takes over everything, underneath his brow.
Yeah. So I can say I've looked at the cover of it super recently, but it's literally, on the other side of my computer screen, there's a copy of it sitting. But yeah, so good stuff.
Good stuff. The Smiths. Need is murder.
All right. So for my next one, number 9, is that where we are now?
Yeah.
I'm going with the 1995 Cardigans album, Life. that features lead singer Nina Persson in a very sort of phony catalog, kind of very, I can't think of the word, I want to say hypoallergenic, but then, sterile, very sterile, kind of fake catalog pose. I don't know, it amuses me. It was their second album, but their first album most places of the world. They're a Swedish band. Most people remember them for Love Fool, which was after this. That was part of that Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. The Romeo plus Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann. So that was a big hit for them. I think it was the only really big hit they ever had, Love Fool. This is prior to that. The first album only really came out in Sweden and I believe Japan. And so their second album was all original material in Sweden and Japan, but switched out a bunch of songs from their first album, which was called Emmerdale, and in around the world. So like the first US edition had 4 or 5 tracks from Emmerdale and dropped 4 or 5 tracks from the second album. And that was the version I was familiar with for a long time. Since I bought it a couple times, and I think actually that first one is like super washed out, the cover, and this is a reissue that sadly I almost don't like as much, just because what they did was they restored the full track listing of their second album, but added on afterward all the songs that they had borrowed from the first album, which were more front-loaded in the version I was familiar with. So the songs like Rise and Shine and Carnival and some of my favorite songs from them, you gotta sit through the whole album, one of which is one of these 13-minute songs. It's really a 4-minute song and 8 minutes of silence and then a 2-minute something. You have to sit through all that before you get the other tracks that you like. So so the album is one of those that's a real mess, but it is super, it's candy sweet. I think they used vintage instruments a lot, so the vintage look of it is appropriate, and the washed out. So I mean, this is washed out, but if I pulled out the other one, it's almost like that Houses of the Holy. I mean, it's like blown out almost,
Yeah.
So this one is a lot more defined. She got some ice skates on there, and so just this catalog pose is very funny to me. They got darker kind of as they went. I think they tried to make a much darker album after Love Fool, and maybe they were feeling like a novelty act after the hit of Love Fool, and so then they followed that up with, I think, First Band on the Moon, which was a lot less fun and a lot more self-conscious and a lot less popular, I believe. And I think they did maybe 1 or 2 things after that and faded out. But this was kind of on their upswing. That is the lead singer in the cover photo there. The photographer is named Martin Bogren, who's also Swedish, and he, just like Anton Corbijn, did with U2 and Depeche Mode, kind of traveled around with them extensively as their photographer. He did with the Cardigans. He toured around and he was like sort of their official photographer for several years. But upon completing that, he put together a book of all his Cardigans photos and then kind of moved on to other things. So he doesn't, like, music photography is not a thing of his other than this early career gig with the Cardigans. So he's, again, just more of a photographer. And he puts out photo books and stuff like that, but doesn't really work in the music industry anymore.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I know the Cardigans. Yeah, they try to up their sound a little bit, or melt, or not be as poppy
Mm-hmm.
later as that album there. I wonder if that comes from, first of all, like I was saying before, being typecast as that sound, and I mean they're out of Sweden, correct?
Yeah.
So you've got that ABBA legacy there always. Anybody that's Sweden, I think, I'm sure ABBA was a big driving force for a lot of the metal that came out of Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, we're not all poppy, musical fans. Some of us like to rock out as well. And I feel like I haven't heard a lot of them after that album, but what I have heard was definitely almost kind of like, we can do more than just that poppy sound. I almost got that impression that we're gonna take it this direction because we want to step away from, the pop aspect of that particular song.
Yeah. I mean, and Lovefool was a great distillation of their sound up to that point, in a catchy song that maybe just got a little overplayed, and gave them the stink of the one-hit wonder. But I still like that song, and it's very much in a mold. But there's an irony, so that's part of what I like about this album cover, is there's an irony to the sweetness. One of the songs on here is a cover of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. So they are one of those acts that could kind of play with darker lyrical themes set to super, super sweet pop music sounds, that were almost twee, it's just so cutesy, and lots of xylophone and, do, 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 do. And yet they're kind of exploring dark things lyrically. And so I think if I didn't get that sense of irony, I wouldn't like that cover as much, of this super phony, sweet, beautiful catalog model shot. That's like playing into an image, tongue in cheek. And so I get it.
No, and it wasn't uncommon, or I shouldn't say it that way. It's a trope that comes up often, where you have a really catchy, upbeat sounding song, and then when you actually sit down and listen to the lyrics, it's quite dark. I guess my big example of that would be Pumped Up Kicks.
Yeah.
By
Foster the People. Isn't it Foster the People?
Foster the People. That one. I think probably one of the more famous ones I know, even though it was a pop song and it wasn't necessarily an upbeat tempo. I remember seeing an interview with Sting, and he was amazed by how many people used Every Breath You Take as their wedding song.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's such a beautiful song. And the reality of it is a dark, really creepy fucking song.
Yeah. Yeah, my quintessential band like that, I mean, it's the Beautiful South, but the House Martins, super chirpy. Chirpy would be another good adjective to describe the Cardigans. And definitely that was the case in the House Martins. It almost got too extreme with Paul Heaton's follow-up band, the much more long-running Beautiful South, whose album I almost chose, but then it seemed like I was trying to be controversial, because that was one that was controversial enough that they changed it. And so it was more the juxtaposition of the title, Welcome to the Beautiful South, and it's got 2 inset photos, and one guy is smoking a joint and another is a girl with a gun in her mouth. And that eventually got changed to teddy bears to, I think, kind of irritatedly acknowledge the so, okay, you don't want this, you don't want this beautiful cover here because it's too rough for you. Here, have some fucking teddy bears, instead.
It's sad when an artist has to change their aesthetic on something, for essentially the lowest common denominator. When I think, it's like, one person can't handle it, or a group of people can't handle it, so we have to change everything. I guess that's one. Well, no, because I've noticed in like metal bands, they'll have. Yeah, I get it. They're horrendous covers as far as like the matter, and so they'll do another version for Walmart, which doesn't have that, where they just zoom in on a particular spot on the picture. You know what I'm saying? That cuts out the entire meaning of the album cover to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. Although I will say that the second cover of Appetite for Destruction is better than the first cover of it. I'm glad. Controversial, not controversial, whatever. The second cover is a better cover. I don't feel like that album would have been the album it was with that original album art on it. That was more graffiti feeling and whatever, the cross thing with all the head. I just feel like that was an album that was improved by changing the album art. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I like the album work. I could see what you're saying. Aesthetically speaking, I think the newer cover was much more closer to what the music was on there. Where the original cover was a bit more confusing in a sense. It's telling a story there, and it's a story I don't think you hear on the album cover itself. I think it was something like, maybe somebody in the band was like, I like that picture. That picture looks pretty cool. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but the creature thing, that was on the cover and stuff, and I don't know, it just, it was off-putting to me, and not because of the implications of the cover art. I just thought it was ugly myself. So I think that the replacement album cover was much better and suited that album's much better.
Yeah. I think it matches what you hear on the album much better. I do like the other picture, even though it's a little confusing because it's, a human girl or a human lady and that robot with the trench coat on. And so I think that that's probably a picture that has much more symbolism in it than it does, because it's weird. Like, could the robot rape the lady? And you almost get that from it, though it's probably more was meant as he roughed her up, selling those little tiny. If you're not familiar with the picture, anybody out in the audience there, it's that, like you said, that weird cross thing coming out over that fence. You got the shocked robot, like, and then there's a girl semi-undressed that, was she roughed up by this robot but it has certain sexual tension in the artwork, and so is it about Um, the robot being upset that she's selling robots, or, I don't know. But I see what you're saying. I think that's a neat picture, but definitely correct on that. That, now that we've gone completely sideways from the cardigans.
Yes.
But hey, it's just about free flow on here, right, dude?
There you go. So you're number 9.
So my number 9. Another classic album from the 70s. I think it has a great sense of humor. I'm going to have to pull it out here so that it gets the full effect. Cheap Trick in color.
There you go.
And you got the heartthrobs on the front there with their awesome, Harley Davidsons there, I'm assuming. And then on the back cover, you have the 2 dorks in the band on bicycles in black and white. And I just think that the humor in that is absolutely amazing. It was, let me get my notes here. It's a photographer that shot that was Beno Friedman. He did a lot of covers for Ted Nugent, Brownsville, and a band called Clout. Excuse me. Basically, he did the shots, but the album concept comes from Jim Carney and Paula Schur. And these are 2 people that have designed album covers.
Great, you fixed it. Perfect.
Fixed it. So, yeah. Jim Carney, he was a CBS executive for CBS and Epic Records. He did a lot of the ideas for those record labels as far as packaging, art design, and things like that. So it was kind of weird how he really managed the look of a lot of their albums that they put out. Paula Schur is an art designer. She's done a lot of album covers for Atlantic and CBS. Some of her other covers that she was involved with was John Prine, who recently passed away, Blue Oyster Cult, Boston, and probably most famously, Bobby McFerrin.
There you go. From his big album, or?
Yeah. I don't know if it was his big album. It just, as I was looking it up, that was one of the people that was listed as that she had done the thing, which seems kind of weird in that, but he kind of does match up if you think novelty-wise, maybe with John Prine. I haven't heard a lot of John Prine, and I've probably just lost a lot of people right here. But there's a sense of humor and humanity blended together in their music, I think. I probably know more Bobby McFerrin than I do John Prine, but I felt that what I've heard from those 2 particular, but I do believe that she did do the original Boston cover.
The spaceship?
Yeah.
Guitar spaceship thing?
So that was her concept. I don't know who did the artwork for that one, but
Yeah, I feel like that's a name that I've heard, but I'm not familiar with her the way I am like Anton Corbin.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm just to some degree I'm a photography guy. I mean, I do photography, and so I maybe know more photographers' names than the average person, which is not to say that of these people that we've talked about in the last 2 days, literally the only name that I knew was Anton Corbin. But yeah, I'm thinking, didn't Heaven Tonight have a similar kind of gag where it's Robin and Robin Zander and the other guy on the front cover and Bunny Carlos on the back?
Cheap Trick album I've never heard.
Ah,
I've heard first one, which I like a lot, which was a little bit different of a sound. Then you had, In Color, and I always thought that was a pretty good one. And Dream Police, and I think I had, what's it called with him with his guitar? Up Next or Next Position, Please.
Yeah, yeah.
That was actually the first I ever got from Cheap Trick.
Yeah, I guess it's similar. Yeah. So this is the cover of Heaven Tonight, and they're not on the back, but there is a kind of gatefold thing where they're being pouty pretty boys, and the other two are goofing in the mirror.
Yeah, I think they moved away from that later on in albums. I'm sure it's got to be tough after a while that you got to be that good of a guitar player and you're still kind of thought of as a goofball.
Yeah. And why can I always think of Bunny Carlos, but I can't think of the guitarist's name? Rick Nielsen. Yes, Rick Nielsen.
Yeah. Well, and I always liked kind of this in the inner cover too, which separated them as well. I'll get that a little closer.
Yeah.
To me, this is almost a little bit of an homage to the Beatles again. The inside of, or the back, is it the back or the inside of Sgt. Pepper's? So you got one of them not facing it like Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Now, there's that rumor now that Rick Nielsen is Nelson. Let me make sure I pronounce that right.
Nielsen.
Nielsen, yeah. Rick Nielsen is dead. He was killed in a car crash in Chicago.
There you go. Yeah, you don't want to get him mixed up with Ricky Nelson.
Right.
Maybe that's why it sounds wrong. But yeah, because Ricky Nelson is a guy.
Yeah. But actually a great album. I think it's one of my favorite albums by them. It's got a lot of their... Well, actually, probably my favorite album by them is at Budokan, their live album. I still think that's one of the best live albums that has been put out. You really feel the energy of that situation. Though I've heard that it's not uncommon for bands to go back into the studio and kind of touch up parts. And so I think that's another album that it's live, but they have touched up bits of the concert in studio. I'm not 100% positive on that. I know other people have done it, and I think that at Budokan was touched up here and there in the studio.
Yeah, I do wish that the Budokan version of "I Want You to Want Me" represented the sound of the album version, which is a lot more sort of pure pop. And I feel like early on, because I mean in a lot of ways, I feel like Cheap Trick was ground zero for power pop. You know, I mean, pop music that had a lot of rock elements to it, rather than rock music that happened to have some tune to it. You know, I mean, they're catchy damn songs, and it feels like maybe they were just such an unknown quantity in the beginning that they're like, well, you can't scuff these songs up with, you know, with electric guitars, and so the production was a little milder than it should have been, and that live version that I mean really kind of cranks it. I really wish, because I've never been so much a live person, you know, a live recording aficionado, but that version of I Want You to Want Me definitely has the energy in it, and the album version then kind of lacks it, especially in comparison, which is disappointing to me because it's such a good song. And so then I end up kind of trailing away from it and going to a little later when it seemed like they were able to balance that. But it feels to me like the Cars and Cheap Trick, you know, the Cars a little more keyboardy, Cheap Trick a little more guitar, but they feel like super ground zero for that kind of power pop, you know, super damn catchy pop songs, but with a rock feel to them.
I think that out of the tradition, and both of those bands I think were big fans of Big Star, which kind of was one of the first power pop type bands. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I've heard that Britt Nielsen has said, you know, without Big Star, there would have been no Cheap Trick. You know, I haven't heard from the Cars, but I know what you mean. It's like that, because it's kind of almost new wave, but you mixing that up in there a little bit with Fast Times at Richmond High, because Cheap Trick was also highlighted on you know, in that movie, and it was kind of that end of that one era of mostly rock and moving into new wave, and that soundtrack kind of, to me, had that little bit of a blend of that, like it's almost like a transitional time in music history, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, even it feels like they're being made fun of a little bit. Fast Times, you know, he's like, "Come on, you got to remember the songs were so great," you know,
right?
Because it's like I don't know if they were ever cool, and it's like they were a little too new wave for 70s rock, but they're way too 70s rock for the new wave, you know, and so they never really fit in either of those niches, and it's been more the progeny of Cheap Trick, you know, that found success with that power pop formula, you know, like the Fountains of Wayne and stuff like that,
right,
than Cheap Trick themselves. It felt like when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a few years ago, that felt like sort of righting a wrong. Like, how could we overlook Cheap Trick, you know? They've never been valued. They've always been kind of the butt of a joke. But like they said in Fast Times, you know, it's the songs, man. The songs are great.
Yeah. I think they ended up being a band that was a little bit too poppy for metal guys and hard rock guys, and it was a little bit too hard for poppy people, you know. But it ended up being that I think they did an excellent blend of being hard rock and pop, especially on songs like Big Eyes, you know, some of the stuff on Dream Police, you know. And I'm still one of those guys that I think that I like the orchestral version of Dream Police with all the violins in it, though I had gotten that a little while ago, and there's a version without strings on it, to, you know, for all those people that were like, I like that song, but it's got strings in it, you know, I don't like the strings, makes it sound too disco-y.
Yeah. But yeah, no, from I think at least through Next Position Please, and because I did not like The Flame,
I didn't care
and
for the.
and their cover of Don't Be Cruel didn't seem like it needed to exist. But that brief moment where they did kind of catch the zeitgeist, got popular on MTV, and maybe had a few hits, that mid to late 80s era, felt like it sort of evaporated that early audience, and it kind of just played more into the straight pop. But yeah, the first 4 albums or so, and my understanding, I've never gone and listened to them, but you know, they've continued to put out albums. I think they hit a point, like the album after the one that had The Flame on it, which may or may not have been called The Flame, like Super Tanked or something. I think they had an album that's super, and then they kind of went quiet for a bit, but came back. And my understanding is that there's like Greetings from Rockford or something like that. Is like a 2000s album that my understanding is they're good, but I've never sought them out to listen to. But the gag of the photo, you know, the kind of playing into the matinee idol looks of 2 of the band members, and then pointing out that 2 of the band members don't look very rock and roll at all.
Yeah.
Is a funny gag, and it takes both sides of that to really show that they had a sense of humor about themselves. And
Right. And it almost seemed like they almost didn't take themselves that seriously either.
yeah.
You know, and maybe that reflects on people too. Well, if they don't take it seriously, then why should I take it seriously?
Yeah.
I think Cheap Trick is definitely in my top 20 of bands. I do really like their stuff. I think it's like you said, when you listen to it, I can't stop moving. I start tapping, you know.
Yeah, really underrated, but I think maybe they're getting their due now more. And obviously, that not that people need to know this, but I feel like it'll be pointed out if we don't point it out. Of course, talking about Big Star, Cheap Trick did the cover of "In the Streets" of Big Star's "In the Streets," and that was the theme of that '70s show.
That's right, which was weird because it ended with "We're all
right."
Definitely, beyond any doubt, a Cheap Trick reference.
Yeah, which I don't think was there originally.
No, it wasn't.
And in season whatever 3, 4, a little later on, then they redid it and added that bit from Surrender. I guess that's from Surrender, right?
Yeah, when that show stopped being funny. I think the first season's great, and after that it just went downhill. I just couldn't. It seemed so manufactured. I don't know.
But anyway, we are aware of the Big Star, of the Cheap Trick cover of Big Star.